mo kí gbogbo ọmọ kóòtù òjìrè jákèjádò àgbáláyé ẹ̀yin ènìyàn mi mo tútù mú fídíò mìíràn wá o fídíò eléyìí tẹ́ fẹ́ wò yìí gọ̀gọ̀ ló máa wá jẹ́ kẹ́ ẹ mọ̀ pé lóòótọ́ lódodo làwọn ará bí fẹ́ gbàjọba fídíò tí mo fẹ́ show yín yìí lẹ máa fi mọ̀ pé lóòótọ́ lódodo àwọn ará bí wọ́n fẹ́ take over màá fẹ́ kẹ́ ẹ farabalẹ̀ kẹ́ ẹ wo fídíò yìí láti ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ dé òpin ẹ̀yin èèyàn mi ogun ti wọlé Nàìjíríà kí oníkálukú wa ká lọ máa gbáradì ẹ lọ máa ro oúnjẹ sílé ẹ̀yin olólùfẹ́ mi ẹ̀yin ọmọ kóòtù òjìrè tẹ́ ẹ̀ ń gbọ́ mi jákèjádò àgbáláyé ẹ lọ máa ro oúnjẹ sílé o ṣe rí àwọn information tá à ń gbà lẹ́nu ọjọ́ mẹ́ta yìí ó ní agbára gan o ní pàápàá jùlọ eléyìí tí mo fẹ́ kẹ́ ẹ wò yìí màá fẹ́ kẹ́ ẹ farabalẹ̀ kẹ́ ẹ wò láti ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ dópin kẹ́ ẹ gbọ́ gbogbo nǹkan tí wọ́n sọ nípa Nàìjíríà ẹ̀yin èèyàn mi ẹ farabalẹ̀ dáadáa ẹ bá mi share fídíò yìí o kó dọ́wọ́ gbogbo ọmọ kóòtù òjìrè kẹ́ ẹ bá wa sọ fún ọ pé kó dira kí wọ́n dẹ̀ lọ ro oúnjẹ sílé ẹ̀yin èèyàn mi ẹ bá mi wo fídíò yìí.
Way here to the rehabilitation center for the Boko Haram. So that means these have not been rehabilitated yet, and this is like kind of a prison because this is actually where they have their sentence, you can say, where they're trying to rehabilitate them. So this will be even more risky than before. But let's see if we get the allowance to get in. So this is not so easy to get into this rehabilitation center. So the people are very friendly, and the one is calling his boss, and another is calling his boss, and another was calling his boss, and now we're going to meet with our general of everything. Yeah, they are imprisoned inside here. I'm not sure if these are, they're probably not. If maybe they are, they could be Boko Haram, and then they are allowed to get outside because he just told me some few of them will get a pass or something to get outside to, yeah, get some water here from the well, or maybe, yeah, little by little try to go out in the town to rehabilitate. So it could be, but they are inside here, and there's like 100 plus Boko Haram members inside here. Oh, so this is one of the security guys from the rehabilitation center. So he's going with us to the general to get the approval, and he's telling us now that there was an explosion here the 24th of December at Christmas, where there was a mosque, which was there was a suicide bomber, but there was also some people collaborating with these guys, and inside the rehabilitation center, they think that there was a guy collaborating with these Boko Haram from outside. So he's now taken to court, right?
They have took him to the general there.
But how is it possible for him to collaborate with Boko Haram from outside? Because
we can't know. Sometimes they used to go out. They will say that they want to go and buy some things. They will move out from morning till night.
Isn't it a problem that they are allowed to go out when they are like terrorists? Shouldn't they be inside until they are like more rehabilitated?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, when they are released for good, will the government have a place for them?
No, the problem with, when they release them for good, the government will give them some money and give them to start some business. So they will release them to go back to their area.
So after a long meeting with that very important person inside that office here to get into the rehabilitation center, or at least he thought himself that he was very important, a little annoying type, if you know what I mean. But the thing is, it got me in more troubles than a solution to get inside the rehabilitation center, because it seems that all the stuff I was doing, I just been doing, you know, I was not allowed. I needed a permission for everything from the governor, not even from the general. I mean, I needed from the governor to visit all these other places with the Boko Haram and the ones who fight them and everything like that to document it. He was like, which company are you from? Where are you from? I never heard about that, anyone like getting a permission for that without a license from the governor and etc. etc. So I was just like, no, don't worry, I just got a picture with them because I could see where things were going, right? Did you take any videos and stuff like that? But I was like trying to kind of man flirt. I'm like, okay, I see, I totally understand. So you're from here. I heard you were in the military doing a really good job. So I just changed a little subject, he forgot about what I actually just did, which was not allowed.
Anyway, I don't give up so easily, even rejected with a warning from the general. So we head on to another Boko Haram rehabilitation camp, trying to get access. This time the biggest with many hundreds inside.
This is a place. Yeah, this is the headquarters of the rehabilitation center. Maiduguri, which is the rehabilitation center of Boko Haram, basically.
I managed to get inside for a short while, but without filming much, because all eyes were on me, and suddenly I needed to speak with the manager running this place. He told me politely I needed to leave immediately. My contact also told me the general from before had called all the rehabilitation camps and likewise places, warning them. But this is filmed from inside the rehabilitation camp, and this is Boko Haram.
Salam.
Then I heard that the Boko Haram repenters, or as you know, many still with Boko Haram minds, were preparing to get out in the bush and fight. So now the military armed them, so we drove back. But it definitely didn't feel more secure.
Not me, thank you. Oh, a little more to think about now, because all of them, they have like weapons here as well. So they are former Boko Haram, so you will never know what they're going to do. But they're actually going in the bush now, right? In the bush. Even here in the night, they will go out. You will sleep in the bush also?
I'm living like one man in the bush. So they're spending month in the bush before come back.
So now when they go, there will be 1 month?
There is some people now, they come. Some people, they come. They go and replace the person they come and relax more.
So they go on shift?
Yes.
Yeah.
Some come in, some go.
Yeah, so they will go out and hunt their old friends, I guess. But it's still very crazy to think about that these people, they have killed a lot of people when they were like in Boko Haram, and then so just now being here with all these former Boko Haram is just crazy, because as you probably know, they did a lot of evil stuff, all of them probably, but now they are trying to do the right thing, or I'm not sure if they are forced to it, and they can probably turn side every moment. Okay, so this was interesting. So now their kind of leader was here, and they were giving ammunition out to these former Boko Haram, because now they're going out in the bush, and he wouldn't let me allow to film that, because the military is also coming, because they will go together with the military, and these former Boko Harams will show the military where their old friends, where the Boko Haram are, so they can tell their locations. So that's why they go together with the military to hunt them down and fight them.
Kam. To kana iya halbo jirgi da haka ibro? Iya mun saba. Kam bala amma bindiga ga babbar bindiga ce. Kam bala to amma dai jirgi yanzu ya gitto maku ibro ai ko a'a. Yanzu na wai. In jirgi ya gitto maku. Babu haka kun ka kada wannan jirgin kenan. Kam bala. Baba goro ba kai amma ana ibro kun samu kahira bindiga wallahi nan kun samu kahira bindiga kuma na ga biyan da yawa sun kai karshen to wanda zago za ku ba kan bada nan to dauda shi yanzu wani abun nan za ku mai to lahi alai.
Nigerians, so this morning around 1 a.m. in the morning, something to 1, terrorists, aka bandits, they attack Bunkasau community in Zarumai village. This community is under, what do you call it again? Under Bukuyum local government area of Zamfara state. Today's date is the 11th of April 2026. I know some people come to my DM, like they used to come to my DM, ask me, why you they put time, date all the time for your this thing. I like doing that because I just want you guys to know that anything I pass here is legit. You understand? It is legit. I put the time, I put the date, I put the village, I put the local government, I put the state. You can go there and make your findings. Then you come back. If it is not true, you come back and leave it on at the comment section. Because you see, this country, Nigeria, is the only country I have to call my home. So if I join in destroying this country, then I'll be without a country. You get, which I don't want to. You get, I love this country so much that I'm ready to fight for this country till the very end. So guys, understand why I put time, date, and everything in my update. You get. So this morning, around 1 a.m., these terrorists, aka bandits, they enter this village. You know how they normally come. Once they enter, they start shooting sporadically. And from that they are shooting. 11 persons were unalive. 11 were unalive this morning. As I'm talking to you right now, about 8 to 9, people are still in shock. Like, what's this up? Like, when is this thing going to end? When is it going to end? Is this the way we will continue living? And that's the question I'm putting out. When is it going to end, Nigerians? Because me particularly, I'm tired of coming out here every day to report about this buying. Are they tired? Are they tired? So guys, let us put hands together. Let us see, terrorism no get religion. I keep telling you, it doesn't have religion. It doesn't have tribe. It doesn't know political party. You get, no gender. So we should all come together and fight this terrorism. The security cannot be everywhere. That's one you know for sure. The police cannot be everywhere. The military cannot be everywhere. The Air Force cannot be everywhere. The civil defense cannot be everywhere. The CJTF cannot be everywhere. They can't. They can't be everywhere. Yeah, we all know that most of them are corrupt, but still, they cannot be everywhere. So, bro, let's come together, fight and defend this country. Fight and defend this country from rolling away right in our eyes. They pain me, they pain me. That's why every time I come here, I say, learn, like, strategically train yourself to defend yourself and your family. It is very important. Nigeria is in a trying times right now. The situation of this country in terms of insecurity is very, very worst. And I can tell you for free. We know things well, but I cannot just come here and start putting everything out, no. So please, please and please, learn how to defend yourself. Now is the time. Learn how to defend yourself, defend your family, and every other thing that matters to you. Please and please.
Is making headlines around the globe. First off, the Defense Headquarters say troops of the 29 Task Force Brigade in Operation Hadinkai successfully repelled coordinated terrorist attack on their location at the brigade headquarters in Beni Sheikh, Borno State. The attack occurred in the early hours of Thursday as insurgents attempted to breach the defensive perimeter of the military installation. However, the troops led by the Commander 29 Brigade, Brigadier General Oseni Brahima, responded with exceptional courage and forcing the terrorists to retreat. Regrettably, the military also confirms the loss of a few brave and gallant soldiers who paid the supreme price in the line of duty. The High Command honors their heroism, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to the defense of the nation while extending its deepest condolences to their families and loved ones. Meanwhile, President Bola Tinubu has expressed deep sadness over the loss of the brave soldiers of the 29 Task Force Brigade Operation Hadinkai, who died in a coordinated terrorist attack on their camp in Beni Sheikh, Borno State. The president also expressed heartfelt condolences to the military and the families of the soldiers, urging them to take heart in the face of the unfortunate loss. Tinubu praised the courage and heroism of the soldiers who fought valiantly to repel the terrorists and ensure that Boko Haram could not overrun the communities the soldiers protect. While mourning the death of the gallant soldiers, President Tinubu urged the leadership of the armed forces and all soldiers on the front line not to be discouraged, but to draw strength from the nation's deep appreciation for their sacrifices. The Minister of Defense, Christopher Musa, has tasked security agencies and the armed forces of Nigeria to ramp up its intelligence network to boost military counterinsurgency operations across the country. General Musa gave the charge when he met with the heads of intelligence of Nigeria's security agencies and the armed forces. General Musa identified intelligence as a critical factor in the fight against insecurity and charged the security agencies to build capacity to develop human intelligence. He also calls for joint operations between all security agencies.
So whatever intelligence we can gather from everywhere, let's harness them together, make it operational so that we can enhance the capacity of our troops that are out there in the field. And in essence, that's why I brought you. So firstly, it's for us to know ourselves. Two, is to now build up this capacity together. And three, to make sure that it counts out there in the field. Asymmetric warfare is a warfare of intelligence. If you don't have intelligence, you are going to be blind. It's not like the conventional one that you are seeing everybody. This one, the enemy is not identified. That person that you think is your friend that is close to you might just be the person that is also planning for you. So that's why I think it's important. And then we look at means and ways that we can enhance these aspects, especially building up our human intelligence and making sure that Nigerians understand that they too have a role to play in passing this information as quickly, as efficient as possible so that actions could be taken as quickly as possible.
Moving on, the United States has ordered the evacuation of non-essential staff and families from its embassy in Abuja over worsening security concerns. As such, the embassy is closed for visa appointments, but operations continue at the consulate in Lagos. Washington has also raised its travel advisory on Nigeria to level 3, urging citizens to reconsider travel. At the same time, concerns are being raised over Nigeria's electoral integrity ahead of future polls. Arise correspondent Godfrey Eshemoge reports.
The United States has expanded its travel warning, placing 23 Nigerian states under level 4, which is do not travel. New additions include Plateau, Jigawa, Kwara, Niger, and Taraba states. U.S. officials cite widespread risks, including crime, terrorism, kidnapping, banditry, civil unrest, and limited healthcare access. Americans are considered high-value targets for ransom kidnappings. The advisory also warns of unpredictable terrorist attacks and sudden military operations, particularly across northern Nigeria, making it one of the strongest warnings issued in recent years. Beyond security, Washington is raising fresh concerns about Nigeria's electoral process. A US-based firm, Von Barton Montague York, says the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, remains vulnerable to manipulation despite international support. The firm references the disputed 2023 general elections and warns that similar patterns could re-emerge. It adds that U.S. congressional staff are expected to brief lawmakers and the National Security Council on the situation. The report contrasts former responses with expectations of a tougher stance under President Donald Trump, suggesting the U.S. may take a more proactive approach if electoral credibility is undermined. It also indicates that global Magnitsky sanctions could be recommended against politicians or electoral officials found guilty of vote rigging, including asset freezes, financial restrictions, and travel bans affecting them and their families. Godfrey Eshemoge, Arise News.
But in a swift reaction, the federal government has reassured Nigerians and the international community of the country's stability and safety following a recent advisory by the United States authorizing the departure of non-emergency personnel from its embassy in Abuja. Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, describes the U.S. decision as a routine precaution guided by internal protocols, which does not reflect the country's situation. The minister says while there are isolated security challenges in Nigeria, there is no breakdown of law and order, noting that the country remains stable. He urged international partners to engage in balanced and up-to-date reporting that reflects the progress being made in the security sector.
Nigeria is not on the brink of any collapse. We have heard these stories over and over and over again. Those who are peddling these stories are also preparing how to live in Nigeria, preparing how to grow their businesses, grow their formations. You cannot have a country that is about to collapse and you are there planning on how to live within it. I think that we need to rethink how we make these statements. What do you think others from outside this country will think of us if all the time we project our country as a country that is about to collapse? We've seen and heard this rhetoric over and over again.
Police Command has dismissed as false a viral social media claim alleging that 488 Boko Haram members were recently arrested in the state, warning residents against the spread of misinformation capable of triggering panic. In a statement, the command clarified that the video being circulated alongside the claim was an old broadcast recorded over 11 years ago and does not reflect the current security situation in Abia State. The statement was signed by the Police Public Relations Officer, DSP Maureen Chinaka, on behalf of the Commissioner of Police. The police described the report as misleading and deliberately designed to incite fear and unrest among members of the public. Moving on, the David Mark-led faction of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, has dragged INEC to the Federal High Court in Abuja, demanding the reversal of its decision to remove the party's leadership from its records. INEC delisted Senator David Mark as national chairman and Rauf Aregbesola as national secretary on April 1. Mark is now seeking a mandatory injunction from Justice Emeka Nwite to compel INEC to immediately restore the full National Working Committee details pending the determination of the suit. Mark also asks the court to set aside INEC's refusal to monitor the ADC's congresses and convention. It further seeks to restrain INEC from recognizing any rival leadership. The suit is a direct response to the Court of Appeals judgment of March 12 in a case filed by Nafiu Bala Gombe. Right, a number of stories this morning, Vimba, a very sad one, of course, with Brigadier General Oseni Brima. So many glowing words have been spoken about his time in service to the country and the people of Nigeria. And beyond this, the president's response to the unfortunate killings of our servicemen, as well as the other stories this morning.
Yes, several stories this morning. Let me start with sort of a low-hanging fruit before I focus on what I believe is the most important story of the day, which is the demise of Brigadier General Oseni Omo Brima and other officers. I want to start with the evacuation of the family members of U.S. officials and notices that have been issued and so forth, because I tap into lived experience from this one. I've lived in a war zone before, and I remember at that time we were students at an international school, and sometimes, usually almost once a quarter, by the way, this is in former Yugoslavia, during both the Bosnia-Herzegovina crisis and the Kosovo crisis. Once a quarter, you would get to school and you'd find that all the American students were absent. You'd find out what happened. They say they have evacuated. Once a quarter, without fail, you would find that the Americans have been evacuated out. Nothing would happen. They would still come back and resume, but it's because of excessive caution. I like that in his report, Godfrey Oshiomoge made reference to the fact that American citizens are high-value targets when there's uncertainty in a country. So I say this to say, yes, there might be threats, there might be information around there around insecurity, but not to over-amplify what it means when Americans evacuate their kin from the nation. Because from my lived experience, it was only on one occasion, the final occasion that everybody evacuated, that bombs started dropping on Serbia. And I quote my father on this, who was the head of the Zimbabwean mission to Yugoslavia, and he said that when the Canadians and the British start evacuating, then you should pay attention. But for now, this is just a caution being exercised by Americans, as we've seen that they leave no man behind, as we saw what they did with the air officer in Iran. So they don't want to risk ever putting their citizens in that situation. All right, now let's focus on the heinous and barbaric attacks that took place yesterday in Beni Sheikh in Borno State. Now, the 29 task force was established in 2015 under President Buhari, and it's said to be one of the most strategic and importantly placed brigades because of its proximity to some of the various bases. Now, what we know is that ISWAP, and not just ISWAP, but all IS-related terror agencies, terror organizations, especially those operating in Africa, have been conducting what is called a Burn the Camp campaign. We've seen the same campaign in IS Mozambique, where they intentionally target military bases. Now, what does this signal to us? It signals a number of things, but one of the most key things that it signals is the fact that it may no longer be as easy to smuggle supplies and weapons from outside of the country as it used to be. And so what they do is they attack these military bases, they loot them, they take weapons, they take food, they take so many things to keep them sustained. So in this light, security experts are saying, well, this is an indicator that they're feeling the pinch of the attacks and that are being made, the war being waged against them. Also, we recall the fact that we now have two major operations that are underway that are targeting terrorism. We have Operation Savannah Shield and, of course, Operation Hadinkai. Operation Savannah Shield goes straight to the ground. It goes straight to the bases of these terrorist organizations, meaning that aside from targeting urban cells, we see them going into the forests where they're hiding out and they're being repelled from there. Now, Beni Sheikh itself is said to be on the route from Maiduguri to Damaturi, and because of that, civilians were also killed because there's a routine road closure on that express, and so many people stop by in Beni Sheikh for the night. So it was a very unfortunate and terrible event. Now, the Brigadier General, the late Brigadier General, is said to have been killed in combat because he was trying to start his armored vehicle and it failed to start as they opened fire on him. Now, we don't know whether it was a result of the fire that had been opened on him or what failure happened to that bulletproof vehicle, but it shows the caliber of officer that he is, that he died on the front lines in combat, and it shows the nature of the type of aggression, of asymmetric warfare that we're dealing with here. Now, let's talk about some of the things that have arisen from this that continue to be trends. Now, if these terrorist groups are still able to get to these huge military camps, because this is not an isolated incident, excuse me, there were simultaneous attacks in Pulka and in Gandu. In Pulka, it's particularly tragic because we know that those who had their homes ransacked in Goshe had actually moved to Pulka in their thousands for safe space, and now the terrorists have located them in that area as well. So it's a double jeopardy in that sense. Now, we're saying that have the military been able to win the hearts and minds of the communities? Because can such an attack happen without some sort of community complicity? And this takes us to some of the ideological doctrines around your ISWAP and your Boko Harams who have now started working collaboratively. Because these are people who are there to undermine state presence and they're there to present themselves as an alternative authority. They are trying to take territory. And we know that their agenda is to access the sea for their terrorist agendas. So we're now seeing this heightened aggression where they're trying to take territory, and we see that it's now a territorial threat because they are ransacking strategic bases that are supposed to defend from the front lines those who are most vulnerable in these most vulnerable areas. So there's the community. Then the question is there sufficient governance? Because the other thing is, with ISWAP, we see that ISWAP tried to pose themselves as an alternative authority. It's quite different from the original Boko Haram philosophy, where it was more about psychological indoctrination. ISWAP want territory. That's their doctrine. And that's what they're doing here. Now, the question is, can they do so if sufficient governance is presented in those areas where the war economy is not attractive to the residents of those communities? parties. And now, as we talk about sufficient governance, people will say, well, these are things that spring up before elections. Why do they spring up before elections? I read a very compelling analysis that said, well, because during elections, we tend to turn away from governance and focus on campaigning. So these are some of the confluences that are happening between a spike in insecurity, pre-election periods, and we have seen this before. But what is unfortunate is that we're losing our best and our brightest. Brigadier General Oseni Brahima is one who so many people, as Ayo said, have spoken glowingly about. I've read so many tributes about him from his time as a prefect and even to his relationship with his twin brother, and what a gentleman he was. So this is truly heartbreaking to see that our best and our brightest, those who are loyal to this country and who are fighting for us to be able to go to sleep peacefully at night, are now being sacrificed, paying the ultimate price. And we pray that their souls may rest in peace, and we condole with their families and these communities who have lost several people. Now, as I round up, let me round up with David Mark and INEC. Throughout this week, we've been saying, well, the place that the political parties or any aggrieved parties can receive respite is the courts. Now, the judiciary is back in focus because as much as we say go to courts, we all know the controversy that has surrounded these court judgments. I was very happy with some of the comments made by our guest yesterday, the lawyer Opatola Victor, I believe his name was Opatola Victor. And he said that maybe it's time for the Supreme Court to issue us some very clear guidelines as to what is internal party affairs and what is not. Because until that happens, every issue is taken to the court, wasting the court's precious time in that. Issues that should be resolved internally. And in some instances, we hear the court continuing to reinstate the fact that we do not meddle in internal party affairs. In some instances, we see injunctions, we see various actions being taken that lead people to ask, well, can the court take such actions? We've seen it with PDP. We've seen it with Labour Party. There's also the issue of vague rulings. So as this issue is being taken back into the judiciary, we pray that whatever the outcome is will be spelt out in very simple English that will be easily interpreted by somebody who is just learning the language. Number two, we pray that this thing that has been described as the triangle of compromise to capture elections between the judiciary, between INEC, the electoral commissioner, and the security forces, we pray that we can see a break in these organizations losing their credibility and people not having trust that these institutions have the capacity and the will to ensure that they can deliver credible, free and fair elections to Nigerians. Because I end with the words of Professor Joash Amupitan, chairman of INEC, who himself said that he intends to deliver an election to Nigerians where the winner will know that they're the winner, the loser will congratulate the winner. That is the election we're looking forward to this year. Indeed. Thank you very much, Wimbai.
Okay, let me deal with the ADC matter first. What the ADC, the David Mark-led group, has done is to go and institute a new suit in the Court of Justice Emeka Nwite. And I think that complicates the process. And I do not know what advice they received from their lawyers. The Court of Appeal, in treating their matter, was very clear. It said there is a pending suit at the Federal High Court level in Abuja, and that you have to go back to that suit. Because that particular case, Nafiu Bala versus ADC and 4 others, which was instituted on September 2, 2025, had on September 4, 2025, ex parte motion and motion on notice. The court ignored the motion ex parte and dealt with the motion on notice and directed that the parties involved, that is the other party, the David Mark party and the 3 others, should be put on notice. Upon which the David Mark group went straight to file an appeal, ignoring that substantive fundamental issue, which is the rest, the subject matter of the dispute that the Court of Appeal, in its ruling of March 12, tried to preserve. Now, the Court of Appeal then directed, you go back to that case and resolve it. You can't just jump and come and raise an objection, at the level of the Court of Appeal. But this suit, as reported, I emphasize that, it's not following the directive of the Court of Appeal. Two options are available to the ADC group, in my view. They could have gone to the Supreme Court to challenge the ruling of the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal now having been rendered the functus officio in the matter. Or they could just have gone back to the Federal High Court and follow the directive of the Court of Appeal to return to that original suit. But they filed a new suit now, asking that the INEC directive be set aside. They've also asked that they should be recognized. INEC should not obstruct them in any particular manner. Now, that's not the real substance as defined by the Court of Appeal. However, what is interesting here is that, okay, they followed our regular advice on this table that the place to resolve the conflict is not on the streets. It's not through self-help. It is through the courts of law. Two, they have also done the right thing by asking for accelerated hearing. We had said on this same table that, they can file an application of urgency. However, the subject matter may be a source of controversy. But I assume that the David Mark-led group is following the advice of his counsel. How it is resolved subsequently without leading to further complications remains to be seen. Those, in my view, are the issues. Second, as for the United States offering a travel advisory. Now, this came from Washington. Now, governments offer travel advisory when they see that the interests of their citizens are threatened in particular locations, or their citizens could be put at risk. Nigeria also has had calls in the past to issue, travel advisories, even if, under retaliatory, reciprocal, circumstances. So this time around, what we see here is that I don't even think that the United States is telling us everything that we should know. They have their men on the ground. There is a strategic military cooperation between Washington and Abuja. They have over 200 men. They have AFRICOM having access all over the place. The cooperation is about surveillance. It's about intelligence. Is there something they know that we do not know? Or that they are sharing or not sharing with the Nigerian government? That's number one. Number two is that what we see is a difference between strategic military cooperation and the reality that we live. Because, since about December, there has been an escalation in the security situation in Nigeria, with two suicide bombings in Maiduguri, in the northeast, and then subsequently we've seen a spread of violence from Kaduna to from Plateau to Kaduna State to Kebbi to Katsina to Nasarawa and also to Kwara. So really, when the Americans speak about the deteriorating security situation, they probably, we seem to have a strong point, because we too, living within that reality, can attest to that. What they have done is to shut down the Abuja embassy. The consular office in Lagos is still open. Visa applications have been suspended in Abuja. In the consular office in Lagos, we're told that this can still continue. Now, the next major point is the response by the Nigerian government. The Nigerian government says, well, this is not a big problem. Nigeria is still a safe place. No, the Americans are not saying that the whole of Nigeria is not safe. They singled out 23 states where the security alert level for Americans has been moved up to level 4. The other states out of the 23 states are at level 3, which is the country level that they are determined before now. So you find states like Plateau, Benue, Kebbi, Katsina, Kwara, and the traditional trouble zones, Borno and Yobe, included in that list. Now, the problem here is that the Nigerian government says this is not true. Well, how do they know what is true or what is not true? Just issuing press statement for the purpose of being seen to be talking. Now, this is why we have been saying that Nigeria needed to have moved fast on the appointment of ambassadors. As we speak, there's nobody of real weight in Washington to engage the Americans. You are just issuing press statement. Most of our missions abroad, apart from the ambassadors that have been rejected, even the ones that will be accepted, they have not resumed. They have not assumed in their office, in their various posts. So this is the price we pay. And what is the big price that we pay? Businesses will likely suffer from this because we're always asking for investors. When the Americans have issued travel advice and they say 23 states have been rated at level 4. If you are a businessman and you are doing risk assessment of a country, of course, you may want to exercise caution. But I think that the Nigerian government, contributed to all of this by its tardiness in terms of the early appointment of ambassadors, many of whom are here have also been rejected. Maybe it's only today or before the end of this week that our ambassador to France will go and report for duty. And yet, Nigeria is in election season already. Now, as for the crisis in Benin Sheikh, I think it's very unfortunate. I think it's very embarrassing. The president has issued the usual statement. Do not despair, the military. Do not be discouraged. The people that died, they are our heroes, and the media should support them. We always support the armed forces of Nigeria because we know the weight of the sacrifice that they make, the gallantry of the officers, but there are more questions than answers. The military defense headquarters, I think General Onoja, Michael Onoja, I think that's his name, he has released a statement saying that, look, the media should beware of misinformation. But the evidence of our eyes that we can see also shows certain omissions. Now, there was a video that has been in circulation, the defense headquarters has not denied it, showing what they call a military base, a military command. It looks like an unprotected, open space, no reinforcement, no protection, in the middle of nowhere, 75 kilometers outside Maiduguri, Benin Sheikh, the place is called. And then at the end of the day, these terrorists, they attacked that open, ungoverned space, and they killed General Oseni Omo Brahimo, the second general to be killed between December and now. In December, it was General Uba who was killed. Was it December or November? Now, second general has also been killed in this war. And it's not only generals that lose their lives. 18 soldiers were killed in that assault. That ambush against a military command of the Nigerian military. A brigade commander will have ordinarily under him about 2,500 to 3,000 soldiers. Now, even if it was a brigade headquarters, he will have minimum about 100 to 300 soldiers. So whether it was a defense, a brigade headquarters, or it was a brigade command with the full complement, the bandits overran the entire formation. Now, APCs, in a normal brigade command, they should have about 150 to 300 armored personnel carriers. If it is, just a brigade headquarters in the theater of war, they will have at least up to about 15 to 30. And yet, they were overwhelmed. In fact, they are saying misinformation. Some media outlets have reported that General Brahimo, tried to rally the troops and tried to get an APC moving. The APC, they said, was in a state of disrepair. It was not working. So these are questions that the military headquarters, defense headquarters, will still have to answer to. Why was the place not reinforced? Why was it not in a place of preparedness for emergency? Why, as has been alleged by some media platforms, would the APC not work? How many APCs, armored personnel carriers, do they have in that location? So what you find is that these, terrorists, they are getting more and more confident. And I think in the report by Godfrey, he was saying some groups are also complaining about the group that he mentioned in that report. That's the group that is doing PR for Waziri Adamawa, Atiku Abubakar. Now we also have to worry about, in this build-up to election, people cannot stay outside, hire people outside with 1.2 billion and be spreading negative narrative that will compromise the integrity of Nigeria. Because what we will lose in the long run will affect all of us. So we must separate between national interest and partisan interest, which seems to be overriding every other consideration. There was one more topic about Abia State, the police command saying that the information that was put out there that Boko Haram, about 300 of them were killed. No, what the police command Abia State is saying is that this is fake news. This is misinformation. And that report is about 2-3 years old, and it's not a current situation. So to go back to the point about the media, we also have a responsibility, as they point out, not to publish fake news, whatever media you call yourself, whether social media or whether citizen journalist, because if we blow up this country, all of us will have to pay the price for it. So media responsibility, and it is called responsible journalism. There is even a book by Francis S. Merrill, which is available in the libraries, that talks about how journalists should be responsible. So I take the point about the media not misinforming people. But when we are told that APCs are in a state of disrepair with Operation Hardenkai in the theater of war, I think it would be legitimate for us to, express our concern.
All right. This morning, of course, the big news is around the unfortunate deaths of our soldiers in the theater of war. And I say this because I believe that we have to come to a place in the country where we agree that there are certain parts, or even the nation is at war against terrorism. And until we see that, our operations, our language, our information will then align. But first of all, let me pay tribute to Brigadier General Osenyomo Brahima. Speaking to a number of his colleagues, senior and those who worked with him in Operation Hardenkai, they were very gallant words for a gallant soldier. The words that have described him this morning, and I use him as a reference point for the other 18 soldiers who were killed. And this is why we often talk about the fact that our soldiers pay the ultimate price in securing the borders and lands of this great nation, Nigeria. People have described him as very smart. In fact, he served as former defense advisor in Pakistan. He's a brain that served in the theater of command. He served there as colonel, and he came back to the theater Operation Hardenkai in Borno State in Maiduguri as Brigadier General. In fact, he had spent over 1 year, and usually the time of office there is 2 years. So he was winding down his time in Operation Hardenkai when this unfortunate incident happened. He was notable for securing the Maiduguri-Damaturu route, and in fact, it says that he provided security for some very important personalities, including politicians. Notably, he was the one who he commanded the parade when President Goodluck Jonathan handed over to President Muhammadu Buhari, and so you can see that this was a man who had served his nation meritoriously, and it would be remiss of us to not acknowledge the great sacrifice and give him the true and tribute that is due to him this morning. It is very sad, and this is echoed by the president. Now, from what we learned in the war in the Middle East, we'll see that wars are driven largely even by words and reportage. We were just talking yesterday about the fact that when it comes to America, Iran, the conversations have shaped discussions. So you see the American president talking tough, talking about the fact that they decimated. This is what America has done. And so you can understand and justify where President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will continue to speak, in order not to defeat the morale of our troops, who must be feeling very down. In fact, in speaking to one of them, they said this is a heavy blow. A number of them will continue to push, despite the fact that this has happened to one of them. But let me also talk about the area itself. From the reports I received, the military has been conducting sustained, intense warfare around that area. They have secured the Beni Sheikh axis. Now, it is critical because it is a follow-through, it is passage route for the insurgents to get to Lake Chad. And so they have occupied that area, and this was the insurgents trying to claim back the land that would provide a thoroughfare for them towards Lake Chad. And so following the Easter break, they had sustained efforts and attacks. And I say this because we must also give kudos to our army, to the military, who have continued to work to ensure that they're able to resettle the land. However, one conversation, two things I'll talk about in terms of our response. Could this have been avoided? Absolutely. Vimba, you talk about the vehicle that wasn't working, Dr. Bati, the APC, and the questions that you raised, very critical. But beyond that is also the talk around investment in multi-level technology. When I asked the question around, surveillance cameras in that axis, what was said was that the cameras that are currently there can only see up to 10 meters when there's bad weather. And in recent times in Maiduguri, they have experienced bad weather, which has made it difficult for airlines to fly, and perhaps visibility was poor at the time the attacks happened. And so the question I asked is, then why do we have such cameras in such a sensitive location? Because laser empowered cameras can see beyond, even in terrible weather conditions, which Maiduguri is plagued with a number of times based on its location. So that's one. We've often talked about investment in technology, multi-level at that level. And so the question is, why hasn't this happened? We keep talking about the amount of money that has been allocated to defense in this country, and yet we keep looking at the fact that we don't have infrastructure that is modern and competent enough to serve the people and serve the soldiers at this time. And so this is a push for that. The second part is the resettlement of civilians in that area. Now, according to someone had spoken to in the military, they said that when you're at war, the best move is to take out civilians from that particular area so that they know the people they are dealing with and they can deal decisively with the enemy. But of course, with pressure, the governor and the government wants to bring back the people to resettle, and that is good. However, what they are asking for is, can we halt on that or postpone that for a moment, move the civilians temporarily? When we keep talking about complicity, the terrorists or insurgents hiding among civilians, and so sometimes we see collateral damage, or we're not even able to identify them, is move the civilians away from that particular area until they are able to clear the area of insurgents, and then after a while we settle this. The military cannot make that decision. It is the government. And so this is, again, calling for the government to perhaps take on that decision. Yes, it's important to resettle the people back to their lands, but it's also important to secure that place so that we do not see a resurrection of, insurgency in that particular land. I'm grateful that the president has come out to speak. I mean, what Nigerians have said is that beyond the words, what we want is action. And so again, a renewed call for investment so that we do not keep losing our gallant soldiers, our soldiers who have a wealth of experience at a time when we're saying that we do not have enough military personnel on ground, and we have had people retired, and we are trying to preserve those who have served in that theater. We want to talk about the fact that they should be protected. Another aspect I'd like to highlight this morning is that the president talked about compensation or looking after the dead, and we've often looked about the welfare of soldiers who lose their lives in the theater, that their family members must be properly compensated, that they must see, other soldiers around them must see that they are well looked after, catered to by the Nigerian state in the events that something happens to them. And so this is a call, and I believe that this administration would do that, the Minister of Defense and Chief of Army Staff, to ensure the welfare of our soldiers, our troops, whether alive and when they unfortunately pay the ultimate price, that their family members are looked after, the state of their homes, their accommodation, their allowances paid on time, their remuneration, their progression chart. And so when we hear things like this is an opportunity for us to talk about that. I would concentrate on that this morning because it is a very sad story when we hear of our troops being killed. Now, if you look at the security architecture across all boards, it doesn't doesn't speak well for this administration. No matter how he wants to be colored and the Minister of Information comes out to speak, the evidence is clear that we have a security situation on our hands. And so when you hear stories like the United States taking action, this is not the first time. Recall that there was an advisory issued around security, heightened security threats in Abuja, and now they've asked for an evacuation of some of their non-essential members and their families. It's a red flag, and people are going to listen. It is important enough for people to take note of the fact that there must be something, that information and intelligence that they have, that we unfortunately are not, rising up to the occasion to. So whether we like it or not, the world will listen. If America is saying that there are travel advisories in parts of Nigeria, America will listen. So how many people will the government blame? If they say it's the media that is not representing or speaking well, we try our best. But if the Americans and other foreign nationals are warning their people about, insecurity in Nigeria, then we have big issues on our hands. So these are conversations that we must be honest about. But the most important thing is that we must continue to praise the efforts of our military and continue to urge the government to do more to ensure that they are protected and that every single Nigerian life.
You dey find real Yoruba gist, culture, truth, and vibes. Now here they Arole Baba Media, no dollar. Subscribe, sharp.